Welcome back, everyone, to the second match of the day here at the European Summer Championship. I'm Raven. Joining me to cast the game, it's going to be Sol. How are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic. Always have a great time doing these events. Had a blast at Americas last week, but of course I'm happy to be back on home turf. You know, casting the region where the real players play. Europe as usual. Yeah,
and we just see a crazy series already. George C winning 4-0, but we do have the next one coming up, which is going to be Ikealyou versus Viper, and we can see the classes.
Straight off the bat, we have some pronunciation issues here, Raven.
I'm not known for that.
It's Ikealyou.
Okay. Every single time you say his name, that's happening now.
All right. Sold.
Challenge given.
Okay.
Okay, so it's going to be these two players.
Good start.
Yeah, I know. So, for me, at least, Ikealyou's feeling like the favorite. I really like his lineup overall.
Yeah, I agree.
And we are going to get straight into the first game. It's going to be Ikealyou's Hunter versus Viper's Dragon Control Warrior.
And right off the bat, I am super excited to see this deck play out. This is a very unusual list. You know, it's Dragon Warrior. That's what you would refer to it as straight away, but it's a controlling list. You see tools like Revenge, Bash. He has Brawls in there as well, but he's not running Shield Slam, which is, you know, classically considered one of the most powerful Control Warrior tools. And I personally am really excited to see this deck, whether it works for him or not, because over the last week or so, I've become a big fan of Bookworm and Netherspite Historian in particular. I think they're incredibly powerful cards, very well situated for the meta as well. It's just unfortunate that they're dragon cards and that the dragon package as a whole isn't too powerful overall.
If you could just play them normally, so they'll be slightly too powerful. But I agree, and what's interesting to me is it feels like Viper's gone with the approach of there are the control elements, but I feel like this deck is like the pure value game.
Yes.
Like my minions are just going to be, because of the dragon synergies, overall better than yours, but Ikealyou's off to a pretty reasonable start with the Kindly Grandmother to begin the game with, and into the Huge Toad and the Wolf. So he's got everything he needs, and even the high main there as his first draw, going to be able to really put a lot of pressure on the Warrior.
Yep, and that is a really big deal that he got the resistant Death Rattle minion early on, because that Fiery War Axe draw there from Viper, if it was just Huge Toad or King's Elec or something like that being developed, then it would have just immediately been smacked down for a tempo gain for Viper. So Kindly Grandmother, one of the Karazhan new additions to the game, is showing its worth here as just being a resistant minion that you can just use to build a platform on that's just resistant to all removal.
Yeah, and also the benefit here for Viper is the Bookworm, and this is the weird thing about sort of later game Dragon decks, is that the Bookworm doesn't feel great to have in your opening hand, but it acts as an activator for all of your early Dragon synergy cards. So we obviously saw the Alexstrasza champion be able to come out there with the extra effect. So it's looking really good for him, and Bookworm can actually get a lot of work done against Hunter as well. Really does remove most of the minions outside of realistically high main and Huffers knocking about.
Yeah, so now this is an awkward point, and I spoke to Viper about this deck, and I was, comparing it, curve-wise to the aggressive Dragon Warrior and saying, what's the difference? And he says, well, the only turn where I really miss the curve that Dragon Warrior has is on turn 3, because I'm playing less options for that turn. I don't have the Fierce Monkeys, Frothing Berserkers, etc. So quite often I'm forced to just, play War Axe on 3 or use Bash as a removal tool. So that's probably the kind of situation we're looking at here, although the Ravaging Ghoul is definitely not terrible. It allows him to pick up some decent trades on the board, but gets immediately contested, whereas using the Bash here allows him to just maintain dominance on the board, I guess, here with his Alexstrasza champion.
Yeah, the frustration is the Toad there, right? If you just Ghoul, then the Toad's still there and going to be able to trade extremely well. But now Ikealyou's going to follow up with a pretty what appears to be a pretty straightforward turn, just dropping the Wolf and continuing with the pressure. And going to just ask Viper if he can keep up, because this Kindly Grandmother is still, even though it's just a 1-1 for now, because the Death Rattle's not procced, it's still chipping away, and he's always a target for cards like Houndmaster. It's a kill command activator, and just a general nuisance for the Warrior to deal with.
Yeah, now double Bookworm in hand for Viper. So his first Bookworm is now at least activated by the second, but this really is probably not the matchup you're targeting Bookworm at. There's a lot of great meta targets for Bookworm in the game right now. Thunder Bluff Valley in Shaman, for example. So many more people playing mid-range Shaman. And in that deck, even if you don't hit the Thunder Bluff Valley, there's Totem Golems, there's Tuskar Totemic, there's Mana-Tide Totems. There's all these fantastic targets. Flame Wakers in Tempo Mage, Fandral, Staghelm, and Violet Teachers against Druid. But Hunter, not so much. Most of their low attack minions have Death Rattle, so it's not a clean removal for the Bookworm. So a little bit awkward for him to have both in hand here, but he does pick up a really strong clear this turn with the Ravaging Ghoul.
Yeah, and I really, although, you know, this is going to stop him being able to coin into one of the Bookworms next turn, I really like the Ghoul play over the Revenge here, because it means you have a minion on the board when the Hunter doesn't, and then that means you can just, it makes your trades going forward so much easier.
Yeah, Hunter is not a great deck at tempo swinging, right? If you can, they are basically forced to build a platform and then snowball. They're not, if they fall behind, they don't really have great tools to catch themselves up. But you can see in Ikealyou's hand right now, he has the quick shot. In Ikealyou's hand right now, he has the quick shot, but he can't follow that up with an additional minion because it's too mana restrictive for him to drop the Infested Wolf here. So I'm actually curious about him going for the quick shot play here, because the Infested Wolf is just a little bit more mana efficient, and it kind of contests the board quite nicely. You still have the Death Rattle effect left over at the end. So interesting that he chose to just, you know, take the quick shot past turn there, but I guess his thinking is, look at my hand. High main into double Call of the Wild. I will go late game against this control deck. Yeah,
I completely agree. That is going to be the key, just to open up the board to just slamming a high main on there and really putting Viper under a lot of pressure, because as we mentioned earlier, although there's you know, a good amount of removal tools in this Dragon Warrior deck, there isn't the shield slams to, you know, for the ease of just killing off at least the first stage of a high main there. And Deathwing in Viper's hand, that is going to be nice to try and reset after a Call of the Wild, if it gets to that point, though, because I feel like Ikealyou is going to be able to just put so much pressure on now, being able to really turn up the heat onto Viper.
I'm going to be honest, these Bookworms are looking a little stupid right now. They do not contest this current situation particularly well at all, and the hits just absolutely keep on coming from Ikealyou. There is just going to be pressure into pressure into pressure following up. He has a decent turn next turn, whether he wants to push damage with the hero power alongside the Infested Wolf or just develop the huge Toad, and then straight into back-to-back Call of the Wild. This is going to be so much pressure for Viper to dig his way through.
Yeah, and we already see the benefit of Ikealyou choosing to kill off the Ghoul, because then he would have been able to actually clear off the first part of the high main and use a Bookworm and, like, you know, present that minion onto the board as a real threat.
Well, he would have had the Infested Wolf developed on the board instead, so the 3/3 could have still traded, and he'd have had the 1/1s left over, which was my question. But, you know, like we pointed out, he's basically just saying, you know, I'm fine with taking one slow turn here because the power of my follow-up turns is so huge. And now Bookworm gets his moment in the sun.
MVP Bookworm, because Rhino is an extremely scary minion, giving all beast charge while it's on the board. And when someone plays a Rhino before turn 8, you are very, very afraid. You're afraid of Call of the Wild anyway, but when all three of them can charge, that's when games end.
Here's the problem, though. Viper's turn on the previous turn, he played the Ravaging Ghoul preemptively to set up a Revenge on the following turn, very much with this card, Call of the Wild, in mind. So he wanted to remove those 2/2/1s on the board to prevent this extra charging damage coming in. But because that Tundra Rhino was played, suddenly his priorities had to change. He had to get rid of the Tundra Rhino, and the extra damage being pushed with the Hyenas here is just now put him in a lethal position, which he is in serious trouble. Does now have the 3 damage Revenge available to him, though, alongside Bookworm number 2. He's going to go Shield Block instead, try and pick up some life gain here. I'm sure the Revenge is getting used. Slam is a very nice pickup in this situation.
Yeah, that's actually perfect, because if he actually went for just the Revenge second Bookworm to clear up the board, then he's on 7 damage versus Hunter. It's too much to try and come back from. So really, really good pickup for Viper there. It means he can clear the board whilst gaining the additional armor to give him a bit of breathing room. But I really like this play as well. You don't need to just slam Call of the Wild. I much prefer just building the board up again, then anything that survives just makes you follow up Call of the Wild and hero power that much stronger.
That's a fair point. He does skip damage on this turn. You know, the merit of like not playing Call of the Wild to an extent is also that you have the opportunity to press hero power on that turn if you want to. But he does also skip the hero power this way. But like you said, he's developing sticky minions that can benefit in the next turns from the Call of the Wild, and that is not the Nether Spite we were looking for.
No. If this was a completely different game of Hearthstone, there was a chance of going Deathwing into Deathwing, which is kind of hilarious. But I imagine Viper will not actually have the time to even think about pulling that combo off.
Somewhere in the back room, Brian Kibler is giddy with excitement at that very thought, but this is not going to be that game, I don't think.
And I like the way the other 2 choices are actually like mirrors of each other. The 2 Drakes that gain attack or health based off hand size, so that's something you see every day.
He's going to go for it again. Chillmore would have been with the big pickup off the first one, but now he doesn't have the mana available, but he's still going to pick it up, try and use it as a defensive option on a following turn. Forced to take a pretty miserable looking double trade into the Infested Wolf, and now at 14 life. There is 6 with Call of the Wild adding 7 plus a hero power. That is just gonna be game. And this Dragon deck from Viper is gonna have his work cut out for him. Its first test has been failed, so this guy who's brought some really unusual lists to the tournament in general is still gonna have to prove their worth.
Yeah, really strong game there from Ikealyou, and he just outpaced Viper, you know, to quite dramatic extents. There was never a stage in which Viper was ahead on the board or even particularly felt comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And like I said, this is a guy who's brought some really interesting tech choices in his lineup. You know, he has Rogue with Violet Illusionist, for example, so playing some very unusual stuff. And when you do take those risky deck building decisions and bring them to tournament, you know the pressure's on you to prove that your decks work. And like I said, the first test has been failed there by the Dragon Warrior.
Really impressive, the sheer persistence from Ikealyou. I was speaking to him yesterday, and he's like, yeah, I've been playing pretty much since early beta. Just been working away, and getting so close so often. Right. And this time, you know, this is the chance, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's a player that I've personally run into when I was playing competitively, you know, in qualifiers, just online on ladder, in open tournaments, etc. And he's a player that I'm sure you'll echo, we've both heard a lot about from a certain member of the Polish casting community who likes to big up his boys a little bit. You know, Nimsh does a lot of work in trying to promote the Polish community, and Ikealyou is one of the players that we have heard a lot about, and it is great for me to personally be up close and personal with him now and give him an opportunity to show what he's worth, and he's making a very strong impact so far.
Yeah, he's off to a great start as we get into Game 2. It's going to be Ikealyou's Druid versus Viper's Warrior again. So Viper sticking to the Warrior and just trying to, you know, get the win with this deck, because I think when you look at player lineups overall, I very quickly make a decision on what's the hurdle deck, you know, the one he has to get a win with and then feel really good about the rest of the series. And I feel like the Warrior is the one for him here.
I think there's a couple of questions that need answering. I mean, there's the Dragon Warrior unconventional list, and I mentioned, you know, just before we went to the video packages, which was Rogue is such a weird list. Like Violet Illusionist in his Rogue instead of some of the win condition cards like Questing Adventure that we've seen. So he definitely has some questions that need answering about his lineup. But Ikealyou is going with the more standard lineup here with the Malagos Druid here, although his list is also a little bit unusual. He's not running Auctioneer. He's playing 1 Maya Keeper. He has Ancient of Wars, and he still has room for the 3 heals, the 2 Feral Rages and the Moonglade Portal in the list. So pretty unconventional build himself.
Yeah, just being able to squeeze it all in and be a little bit more defensive. And this matchup generally, if we're going to call this deck sort of Control Warrior, normally is very difficult for the Druid to actually win. But, you know, as we saw, this isn't the conventional list at all. It's very minion based, and I feel like Ikealyou may have a much better chance with this Druid list, because there's not going to be the removal that's very lined up with the Druid minions, right? You know, with no shield slams, these Arcane Giants are going to be very difficult to deal with.
It's true. You know, I spoke at length with Viper about this deck in particular because it's so unusual, and he's, you know, basically of the opinion that because the deck is minion based, he's not going to spend as much time armoring up. So in his opinion, the Shield Slam is a win more card. That's the way he put it. So yeah, if he was in a position where he got to gain a bunch of armor with this deck anyway, he'd be in such a comfortable position because he'd also have minions on the board. He doesn't really need the Shield Slam. So I'm wondering if this deck might have a little bit of a stronger matchup even against this the Malagos Druid, because you can actually pressure them at the same time as gaining all the armor through Justicar True Heart and the shield blocks, etc.
Yeah, it definitely shifts the battle plan for the Druid, because you know, we were talking about this Druid list as we could see the Nourish come down there with the second Nourish available to Ikealyou as well to really fill up his hand going forward. But we're talking about the way this Druid deck seems to have to really alter its battle plan depending on matchup. There's not really a clear defined way to win across the board against everything. And again, this is going to be more, you know, minion removal and try and sort of stay alive as opposed to really put the pressure on the Warrior.
So now, with Viper drawing the Bookworm for on curve next turn, Viper will be sat there saying, please, play a Fandral turn. See what happens. Just try it. But unfortunately, no such luck. Ancient of War comes down, and with no execute in sight, Viper is going to have to go through this the hard way. But as I said, Viper, set this deck up to me to say that I don't need as many removal tools in this deck because I can use my minions as removal when I need them. And sure, this is an unattractive trade for Viper here, but still, he's able to deal with this Ancient of War on the board because he's actually generated minion pressure in the early game.
Yeah, exactly. Unattractive, but doable. Definitely doable. And we see the power of the Nether Spite there. Just discover a legendary dragon, it feels like most of the time. And what do you even pick here? So many options, although I feel like Onyxia is the safest.
Onyxia is definitely a big deal. Chromagus can be combined with Slam, though. That's actually a combo that Viper talked about to me when we were talking about the deck as well. Yeah,
he's planned for this.
I was actually, expecting to see the Chromagus there because he definitely pointed that out as one of the big dragons that he does like to discover. And we were talking about, just Nether Spite Historian stats in general. I think there's 20 possible dragons you can discover just at neutrals if you don't have the class dragons. And 7 or 8 of them are just these huge legendaries. So you get so much value generated with that simple 2-mana card.
Yep, and on a scale of 1 to 10, how much are you wanting to see Bookworm do work this game?
I want it. I want it so very bad, but he's just not going to draw the Fandral. He's just going to tease me with it the entire game.
So we can see that Viper's game plan overall, he seems to be doing pretty well, keeping the pressure up and keeping the minions on the board.
Yeah.
Ikealyou has a couple of options. The Moonglade Portal could heal him up and really get some of those powerful minions on the 6th drop. It's crazy. Like Ken and Sylvanas being the two that really scream out as the ones you would really like, or like even a high main at some point.
Yeah, he doesn't really have a clean way to react to this board right now. Moonglade Portal just feels a little bit slow based on what you're facing down. Quite often your 6-drop minion has 5 health. That's actually a very, very common outcome, and 5 health is pretty easy for your opponent to deal with right now. So I feel like this might just be a draw your deck turn. Be willing to play from behind here for one more turn, but that is a lot of pressure still coming on the board, so I can understand Ikealyou just wanting to go for the Emperor turn. But yeah, I mean, it looks like that is very directly the 2 choices he is trying to choose from. Decides on the Emperor in the end. I definitely can't blame him. This is a little bit of a panic switch from his perspective. This isn't the ideal scenario that he would like to Emperor in this matchup, but just feels like he needs to try and fight back on the board a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the hand. Like, that is not a hand you really want to Emperor at all. It's more just playing it as the minion more than anything. He's going to be able to get a pretty nice slam off there, just going for the 3 damage. He could have cleared the Emperor anyway. He was going to use the weapon, but he does remove the potential later combo of Chromagus Slam.
He does, and he also could have protected his life total just a little bit there by using the Ravaging Ghoul instead on that turn and trading in with the 1/3 and not face tanking the 5 damage with his weapon, which, from Viper's perspective, his opponent has just Emperored a big hand, right? So there is some serious potential burst damage coming out over the next couple of turns, but he doesn't feel too insecure with the amount of life gain in his hand that he has just from that Justicar Trueheart, and that is not too bad. And Bolf is a pretty poor outcome, honestly.
Yeah. It's got to say, our friend from prelims.
Yes, indeed. Suddenly, I just feel like Savitz should be casting this game because
let's go. Let's switch out.
He knows more about Bolf Ramshield than any man alive, I'm sure.
The Feral Spirit going to be used there. Sorry, the Feral Rage. That's the 2nd time I've done that today to actually clear up the Seor Drake. So not looking too bad. Bolf takes the damage. Why not?
The card's so bad. Every time I see it, apart from that one situation that you referred to in prelims, where it was Shifter Zerus into Bolf Ramshield, easy for me to say. I mean, let's just Bookworm it.
I was going to say, Sol, you got your chance. Bookworm is an option here, and it looks like a pretty nice one to effectively just deal 5 damage to Bolf there and clear him off the board and stop any confusion that can arise with this minion.
I mean, do you Bookworm it? Because the worst thing that could happen is that you Bookworm this minion, which is essentially just a free kill over the course of the game, right? You can hit face and Bolf takes the damage. For those of you not familiar with how it works, like, you can kill Bolf with minion trades without taking any damage on your minions themselves. That's what makes the card so poor. So do you really need to use a premium removal card like Bookworm here to take care of it when you'd much rather hold that back for Fandral, for example?
Yeah, the only thing I'd think about here is, what if Fandral never gets played?
Sure.
Whereas you drop in a 3/6 on the board that the Druid's going to struggle to deal with. The other option as well was Justicar, which just starts to get your armor rolling.
Well, the other option was just slam Chromagus. How does Druid deal with a 6/8, even with that 3-power Bolf on board, right? It's a pretty rough turn for them to be able to deal with it.
Yeah, and the Justicar can just get cleaned up very easily as well, which is the problem. You gain the armor, but you know, as you said, Viper's not really planning on, you know, out-armoring the opponent in this game. He's just going to pressure him. So I don't mind the bookworm at all here.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with it. I mean, Chromagus, from the other perspective, if he can get Chromagus down on a clear board, then the question just seriously becomes, how does Druid deal with this? So I can totally buy it. It's just, you know, both just... It seems like a minion that you don't want to waste actual cards on, right? You just feel so unimpressed by both that you're just like, oh, I'm just going to deal with this whenever. But sure, like you said, just developing a 3/6 on the board, perfectly fine.
And Bolf is going to be very upset after this series, as you've just completely
I've just
ruined
assassinated his character. I'm sorry, Bolf.
He's probably just a nice guy.
I'm not sure if Savitz will ever talk to me again.
Yeah, they'll talk about you, though.
Hey, at least I've spent the whole series talking about how much I like dragons now, so I'm probably friends with Kibler again, at least.
Yeah, lost one, gained another, right?
Solid.
You've come out even after this. Okay, so with the Innovate as well, it's going to help get out the Arcane Giants, which I feel like was one of the drawbacks of Ikealyou's hand over the past few turns, having the big impact cards, but not playing enough spells so far in the game to actually get them going, because Arcane Giant's great, but when you play it for 6 or 7 mana, it feels so much like less impact on the turn, especially when you're already behind on board.
Yep, there is one execute in hand here, but, you know, this is one of those situations where you have to beg the question, could one of these cards be a Shield Slam? Because then suddenly we're looking at a potentially pretty strong turn to be able to eliminate these a lot more efficiently, but still, one execute, nothing to sniff at here, can take out one of the 8/8s pretty tidily, and then just has to solve the problem of dealing with the other one.
Yeah, and the thing is, he kind of has to deal with them both as well, because you could just die next turn.
Again, yeah, the hand has been Emperored, so you know, discounted Malagos, discounted Living Roots, you know, all of these things are in your opponent's range.
And there's also as well, like, you know, if Viper's actually been tracking the, you know, where their cards are in the hand, those Moonfires have been in hand for a long time.
They are the only 2 cards left that have been Emperored, though, which, you know, looks weird to us because it looks like there's no discounted cards left in the hand, but of course, from Viper's perspective, if he is keeping track, he'll know that just those 2 cards on the left-hand side have been discounted. Looks like just Chromagus here to try and contest the 8/8 in a weird sense, you know, at least incentivize the trade, and that way he has tools to clear up next turn with, you know, things like Ravaging Ghoul and Revenge, but yeah, the lack of spot removal in this deck possibly coming back to bite Viper here, and that is 12 damage from hand with the 2 Moonfires and the Malagos, plus the 8 from the Arcane Giant, so not quite there yet for Ikealyou, but he might just be considering just outright making a push here and just deciding that it's face time.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Both players are kind of on edge a little bit because both players are very much in range of just dying the following turn. Yeah. So I feel like from Ikealyou, he needs to just go for it. He has Feral Rage and Swipe, so you could just bank that damage now and then, you know, build into the Malagos turn to follow up and try and, you know, really cash in on the fact that the second Arcane Giant wasn't dealt with, but he has gone with the more conservative play and actually just killed off the Chromagus, didn't want any crazy shenanigans coming out from the multiple card draw for Viper.
Yep, so Ikealyou does blink, but if he had left that board up and hadn't hero powered, the 6 power plus the 3 and then Gromash and Revenge, that would have been enough to seal the game. He's actually still not far off because of the Fiery War Axe attack he has as well, but is going to have to find some way to address this board, and with a couple of Whirlwind effects in his hand, he is able to do that quite effectively. The problem with using both of the Whirlwind effects here, the Revenge and the Ravaging Ghoul, is that he's going to lose his Bookworm in the process to the trade into one of the Drakes.
Yeah, definitely worthwhile though, because again, suddenly with very few minions...
I have a spare Chromagus!
Again! Yep. This Chromagus will double draw a card at some point in this matchup. That is Viper's grand plan. But as I was saying, suddenly with no minions on the board, Malagos has a much bigger ask to be able to just kill him there. So Viper's just securing his position, and with a flurry of extremely high value cards in hand, he can just do what he wants next turn.
This Raven Idol could be huge for Ikealyou here. No more burn that can be combined with Malagos. Does pick up a Nourish though, which is never the worst thing in the world. This deck, with the Malagos strategy in the Druid deck, it becomes much more focused on drawing your deck every game. That's why a lot of players are including Gadgetzan Auctioneer in the list, whereas you know, a lot of the time with the more token built list, you'd see people nourishing for mana much more often because, you know, Ancient of Wars, Wisps of the Old Gods, all of these powerful combinations that you had. Whereas, you know, this deck just, you want to draw 30 cards game after game after game if you can. So anytime you can pick up a Nourish, not a bad feeling, but I'm sure Ikealyou would have been loving the possibility of an extra Living Roots or Moonfire there.
Yeah, it would have been kind of insane and really opened up the sort of levels of health he can deal with from Viper. But we do see him go a little bit wide on the board with a Maya Keeper. No need to ramp when you're already on 10 mana. And Sol, there's your favorite card again.
Sweet, sweet Bookworm.
Just in time for the Maya Keeper as well.
Yeah, it's not a bad target. It can take out the 3/3, but that would be his entire turn in this situation. Yes, he gets to address a 3/3, but the level of drop-off in power of the minion that he's developing for the cost of doing that is pretty severe in this situation. So I wouldn't be too surprised to see him go with Grom or Chromagus here instead.
I was just going to say Chromagus.
Yeah.
He loves that card, clearly.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be too bad as well, because at the moment, the Justicar kind of has the same issue. With although you gain the armor, it's easily dealt with the following turn.
Yeah.
Did choose to go for Grom, though, and just present quite a lot of damage for Ikealyou to really think about this turn. And again, you know, Druid kind of struggles with the big minion removal, because there's not that many Druids even playing Mulch anymore.
Nope. Generally, unless they pick up a big spot removal from a Raven Idol these days, then big minions are an absolute nightmare for Druid to deal with. This was historically the case. This is why pretty much every Druid deck was running Big Game Hunter back in the 3-mana days. They just had no good tools to deal with these big minions, and Mulch for a while filled that role that Big Game Hunter was filling after it got nerfed. And now they've kind of just gone back to cutting out the Mulches again. So Ikealyou does draw there with the Nourish, and straight away you can see the power of filling up his hand, because now that is some serious burst damage coming from Malygos, and has the swipe to clear out the Gromash.
What would you have thought about the Innovate Feral Rage that turn?
To face?
Yeah.
So there are 15, 17, 18, 19 damage in hand from Malygos. So you're not setting up lethal with it, right? So I don't really see the point.
It's always good to go face, though.
It does always feel good to go face, and that's definitely, I've been playing a ton of this deck, the Malygos Druid, over the last couple of days, and it's a play that I've seriously found myself making a lot. Just swipe face, ignore your board. Feral Rage face, ignore your board. Sometimes that is the push that you need to make, but in that situation, it just didn't really get a lot done, I don't think.
Oh, is this going to just be a Yogg turn? Ikealyou just hovering over it, just playing with us. As one of the general ideas in this matchup is you play your Malygos, all of you burn, then follow up with Yogg, just to guarantee that Yogg doesn't do anything stupid with your hand, like a mainly Ancestral Communion. But let's see what Yogg is going to do as the Thoughtsteel picks up Mind Control. Okay, got the good one.
Everything's coming up Millhouse so far, but Divine Strength, yeah, that hits the right target as well. Mind Blast is beautiful.
Yeah, that is so big.
Right up his alley right now. Flame Strike, irrelevant. Oh. Mind Blast number 2! This is a pretty absurd looking Yogg spot so far.
Okay. That is kind of nuts. And that is just it. Wow. That is actually just one of the best Yoggs I've ever seen.
I would not go that far.
No, in terms of like the game plan overall, the double Mind Blast and creating a huge Yogg is kind of crazy. The
crazy thing here is that the secret is Catrick, so if Shield Block is cast here for a defensive tool to try and pull out of range for Viper, that damage that he gains from the Shield Block is basically immediately negated, swept away by the Catrick appearing. So this is going to be a difficult situation to navigate his way out of for Viper.
There's one card on the far left that looks reasonable.
I mean, if he Deathwings, he's dead to Malygos, right?
Yeah, he doesn't know that though.
I think he's within his rights to know that. Based
True,
on
I mean,
two Emperor cards being held the entire game, and basically Ikealyou's entire deck being in his hand right now.
Most of his deck by now.
Yeah, I definitely don't blame him trying to find an alternate line here. I think he was drawing exactly for his second execute to try and be able to gain some more life and get out of range that way, but just not going to be good enough. And the second test, the second port of call for this unusual Dragon deck has been failed as well. And we're going to see Malygos come down here. And it's going to be a 2-0 lead for the journeyman Polish player here. And Viper has a long way to come back into this game.
Yeah, definitely a rough game for Viper. Everything just wasn't quite enough. He had a decent start putting the pressure on, but as we said, that Yogg really flipped things around and it opened up the Malygos kill from Ikealyou. So pretty reasonable in terms of his name.
Yeah, I mean, you were thinking about Feral Rage Face the turn before, right?
Yeah.
So if you're in that world, if you're thinking about damage, a double Mind Blast Yogg that puts a 12 power dude on the board, pretty solid.
Had 2 shots with the Dragon Warrior so far, and both missed, although that second game was actually really close.
It was, yeah. It definitely could have come down to the wire, or definitely did come down to the wire, sorry. But yeah, interesting looking at that interview there where he does seem to be a bit of a lone wolf, right? And that is a very solid explanation for why he's not really conforming to the norm in terms of ways that you build these decks. You know, the unusual Dragon Control Warrior, the unusual Rogue deck that I talked about before, you know, packing the Violet Illusionists. So yeah, I mean, if you're not really part of, you know, any of the core practice groups of the professional Hearthstone scene, then you know, that goes to a long way to explain why, you know, your way of thinking is a little bit different, and it's up to Viper here to prove that his way of thinking is going to be good enough to get him through this tournament.
Yeah, we are starting game 3, and Viper has seemed to bailed out on his Warrior for now at least, and he's going to lock in the Freeze Mage versus Ikealyou's Rogue.
Yeah, and definitely a little bit of a resurgence in Freeze Mage over these last couple of weekends. Freeze Mage didn't perform overly well in America's Championship, but again, some players here definitely had a lot of faith in it, and I feel like a lot of the meta calls have been dictated by the presence of Freeze Mage to an extent, because you know you'd have to look at 2 of the players who are favorites for this tournament, George C and Dr. Hippie, were heavily expected to bring Freeze Mage. Whether they did or not is a story we'll get to a little bit later on, but Viper, another one who's fallen down that Freeze Mage route, so it's interesting to see whether he gets caught in some of the counters that people have brought expecting Freeze Mage, such as all the Control Warriors that we're seeing.
Yeah, it's really difficult as well, because when you come to a tournament and you know there's a few Freeze Mage players knocking around, you kind of don't just want to hand them almost a free win, right? So, you know, definitely a thought process into that, as this is just an 8-man. It's, you know, there's not too many players to consider. So, yeah, we'll see how it turns out, and Viper getting off to a pretty reasonable start there, the Arcane Intellect, just being able to start cycling through the deck, as it's pretty much what Freeze Mage needs to do to be able to set up those very sort of regimented, I will finish the game in 2 to 3 turns.
Yeah, and he has found himself a strong matchup here with the Freeze Mage. You know, Miracle Rogue variations are classically not very effective against Freeze Mage because they are combo decks that are so finely tuned to try and kill an opponent once. That is what the goal is. It's draw your deck, and then you know your deck reaches critical mass of the point where your opponent just cannot survive one push of burst damage. But Freeze Mage, of course, asks you to kill them 3 times over the course of the game, plus any healing or freezes that you have to bust your way through. But this new variation that people are running with Questing Adventurers does have the potential to at least come up with, you know, persistent board pressure and tempo throughout the course of the game, and actually beat down Freeze Mage in a way that a lot of the favored decks against it are able to do.
Yeah, and I was actually sat with Ikealyou yesterday. We were playing some Rogue, and what really impressed me, and he said he's basically played Rogue variants since early beta, so he loves the class.
Yeah.
And you could tell, because he very quickly identifies how he needs to win any given game, like very quick, and just goes all in on it. He doesn't really, you know, try and cut any corners or like go halfway into a strategy. He just goes all in with what he knows he needs to do. If he wins, he wins, and if it's not enough, it's not. And I feel like, especially in this matchup, you kind of have to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say, that is really promising for his chances with this particular variation, because this variation, more so than any, often relies on, all right, I'm all in. Like, you know, questing prep of this conceal, go. I'm going to cold blood this and hit you for 18 next turn, right? Like, quite often you just have to take that
happened multiple times yesterday.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's what the deck is built to do. But yeah, it's definitely positive for Ikealyou's chances in this matchup that he's able to identify those situations. But he's still a little way away from generating that win condition just yet. But he does at least have the Gadgetzan Auctioneer and Conceal tool in his hand that he can use to at least draw into his deck. But it's not the amount of pressure that a concealed Questing Adventurer is. Yeah,
and Viper there just choosing to clear off the Tomb Pillager. Just doesn't want to just give him 5, you know, take 5 damage the next turn for free, but does give Ikealyou the coin, which means he's been able to go straight into Azure Drake and really help out just with his curve in general. As now with 2 Gadgetzans, as you said, the prep Conceal, now backstab, there's, you know, quite a lot of work he can do in the next couple of turns.
Sure is, and this mirror image in hand here for Viper is going to be an awkward card to time. You know, we were talking about the inclusion of mirror image in Freeze Mage recently, and you know how the timing of it is so key, right? It's a very high skill cap card because you want to play it. You know, if you're not using it to protect a Doomsayer, if you're just playing it to prevent damage on board, you want to time it at the point where you prevent maximum damage. So, for example, turn 5 against Hunter. because on turn 6 they want to develop a high main, and then so they just put these huge chunky minions down. You have these 0/2 taunts on the board, so finding a situation where it will prevent the most damage against rogues specifically is a really complex calculation, because you have to take things like Fan of Knives into consideration. You have to try and predict what minions are coming down and when. So,
and even the problem of cards like Cold Blood, you could just get double Cold Blood from a minion you weren't expecting. There's suddenly so much damage just banked for the rogue. But really nice cleanup of the Azure Drake there, using the Thanos and actually cycling a Roaring Torch into the deck, which is going to be pretty key, as we've seen Viper actually use up some of his burn already in the form of that Fireball.
Yeah, this is a big whiff turn from Ikealyou here, which makes me question the choice of the Coin Drake earlier. I can understand him wanting to keep up consistent pressure, but just his curve management seems a little bit questionable when he had those 2 Auctioneers in hand, and coining out the Tomb Pillager, 100% fine. It replaces the coin in your hand, but from there, using the coin just to go through to Drake and leaving himself with this potential whiff turn here, potentially he could have, this turn already, we could have seen Coin, Gadgetzan, Backstab, Preparation, Conceal, for example, and he'd have a huge chunk of his deck in his hand right now.
Yeah, I do understand wanting to just keep the pressure on those
as
well.
Yeah,
because,
totally buy it.
The second the Drake doesn't die, then you can start really cashing out on the spell power and then just really, continue on with some powerful turns. But yeah, did get punished for it in the end, and Emperor's going to come down for Viper on a pretty reasonable Emperor, hitting the 2 Frost Bolts. And the Ice Block is kind of nice, because it means whenever Ice Block gets Emperored at least once, you can really squeeze it into turns a lot easier as well.
It's also worth noting that he left the Blood Mage Thanos up on the board on the previous turn instead of choosing to hit it with the dagger, which does 2 things. First off, you're going into your opponent's Emperor turn, so don't give them the extra draw to hit their Emperor. Secondly, if there was no minion being developed by the Freeze Mage, which is very possible, then that Blood Mage is still on the board as a backstab target as you're going into your Gadgetzan turn. So very, very small micro play there from Ikealyou, but really, really strong understanding of matchup considerations.
Yeah, it's exactly what you need to do to win a game like this, right? We did see a nice clean kill onto the Emperor as well as the Thanos, and the Gadgetzan's alive, and after seeing 2 burn spells already come out for minion removal from Viper, he's got to be feeling at least half confident the Gadgetzan could live, and even if not, he's got the follow-up of the second one next turn.
Yeah, so now Viper has to make this the sad consideration of whether he really needs to Frostbolt Ping or Fireball this Gadgetzan Auctioneer, because he's already fast approaching the point where he's building up the burn himself in hand, so he doesn't really want to break up too much of it. But there's certain threats which, even as a Freeze Mage, when you feel like you have such a linear win condition in your deck, it really is not that linear. You have to adjust to situations like this and ration out your burn to just extend the game even longer, therefore draw even more burn, as well as the Alexstrasza that you need to get the whole thing going.
Yeah, and also, Gadgetzan's one of the cards that could actually really push Ikealyou ahead in this game.
Absolutely,
so, if it was almost any other minion, it would just be freeze, move on, for a turn and then carry on like that. But with Gadgetzan, you just can't leave it up, because it could really, really swing the matchup against you.
It's interesting. Viper there could have had the potential to at least try and protect the Loot Hoarder on board from the dagger hit, and leave it to attack on its own initiative into a minion that's played by playing the 0-mana mirror images alongside it. And we talked about timing this card earlier, and he chose to hold on to it there even for the 0-mana. So definitely has some specific plans in mind for this card.
Yeah, I can imagine those plans potentially revolve around a card called Leroy or Questing Adventurer or Van Cleef.
Walling out a Questing Adventurer.
Yeah, exactly. So the second Gadgetzan does come out with the Conceal as well. Prep's drawn, but I imagine it's going to be held onto this turn, although Ikealyou is just sitting, thinking about what he could possibly do. But it doesn't really gain him too much to just prep Shiv out of nowhere just for the cycle, when he could potentially build up one of those huge Van Cleefs next turn. And that's, again, just another way you can really get ahead in this game. If you put a massive minion on the board, Freeze Mage doesn't normally do too well at dealing with them.
Yeah, and Viper does have a copy of Flamestrike in his Freeze Mage deck. Not all do. Of course, this tournament, the deck lists are revealed to your opponent, and in fact, all the players in the tournament as a whole. So, Ikealyou will be knowing that there is an out to deal with this Concealed Auctioneer here, but it's only a single copy in the deck, and it would be his opponent's entire turn, essentially. So, very, very willing to take the risk here with the Conceal, and gets paid out for it, as the Flamestrike is not in hand for Viper.
And now we're going to see the speed in which Viper will play with this Auctioneer, because I feel like there's a lot to suffer from. I've seen some players in the past aren't used to Auctioneer decks in terms of Rogue or Druid, for example, take a little bit too long with the decision making, and then suddenly the rope starts burning, and then things get really dicey.
And here's the important thing. He understood where his divergent paths were in the turn, right? A Gadgetzan Auctioneer turn draws you so many cards. He knew he was starting his turn with prep that turn,
like all the time.
So he cast prep first. Now he's stopping to think after reacting to the draw as to how exactly he wants to navigate his way through this turn. A lot of players would have paused to think over the whole turn at the start of the turn, because classically that's what good practice in Hearthstone tells you to do. But the problem is when you're drawing cards over your turn, you need to be able to react to the extra cards that you draw.
Yep. And is this is actually going to overdraw Viper, right? If he's going to Fan of Knives this turn.
I'm almost certain we're going to see a fan being used here, which, this was the big consideration, I guess, for Ikealyou, which, he's prepped out the lower value spell here by using the prep on the Shiv and then following up with the Fan of Knives. So he's actually valuing burning one of his opponent's cards over saving himself one more mana with the preparation. But since he's just ended up with an Edwin Van Cleef turn here anyway, that's not a big deal. And am I seeing this right? Has Viper drawn through probably a good, 20 cards in his deck, and we have not seen a Doomsayer yet?
Yeah, that's kind of crazy, isn't it?
Unlucky.
Yeah, this is rough. He does have a lot of frees available, though, with 2 Blizzards and the Frost Nova as well.
21. Good guess.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wasn't too bad.
Pat myself on the back a bit.
So yeah, he's got a lot of freezes, so he can stall out, but also you've got the real problem of you do need to kill the board eventually, and we can see now with 2 Questing Adventurers available for, even if everything goes terrible for Ikealyou here and he loses the board, you just restack it, and then Freeze Mage can't normally deal with these kinds of minions, wave after wave. He really just does run out of resources pretty quick.
Right. The problem here with repeatedly freezing the board is that 2 of his freezes are expensive, undiscounted Blizzards. And when you play a Blizzard, it's very hard to progress towards a win condition in the same turn. So I was just actually about to suggest this same play where Viper has to realize that now the moment has passed. The stalling plan is out the window. He needs to set up a win condition for himself. So I like him going down the burn plan here, using the cheaper Frost Nova to set up some burn damage for himself and load up some card draw on the board. He's already sat with a Roaring Torch, a Fireball, and a Frostbolt in his hands. That's 15 more damage, plus an Ice Block he has for a guaranteed turn, plus Loot Hoarder on the board for almost a guaranteed draw until your opponent very wisely saps it, because you probably have a hard read right here that Doomsayer, even if it's in hand, your opponent has understood that the point of the game where Doomsayer is going to be effective has long since passed. So he understands that just denying card draw with the sap is first and foremost it.
And also the damage as well. The minions just chipping away. Suddenly at 22, this late in the game, just an extra 2 damage from nowhere can actually just be the difference between surviving a turn and not. So, really good play there with the sap from Ikealyou. And look at that board. Extremely scary, but Viper does have the double Blizzard. But as he said, it's going to slow him down a little bit. But with the reduction on the Ice Block, it means he can actually just squeeze in a ping, which is another strategy you see a lot of Freeze Mage players using. Just every single ping to face if they're not planning on dropping Alexstrasza, which obviously Viper doesn't have available at the moment. Every single ping to face matters.
Yeah, and again, this is a concept that Laughing talks about extensively. Laughing, for those of you not familiar, almost indisputably the best Freeze Mage player in the world. He talks about the turn as Freeze Mage, right? And when it has passed, when the time to interact with the board, to clear your opponent's minions, to stall for time, when that moment has passed and when you have to go on the burn plan. And I think Viper recognized that turn pretty well this game.
Yeah. 100%, because he has the second Roaring Torch as well in the deck available, doesn't he? So suddenly that, one draw can just really end the game for Viper here and get him that 1 win on the board, as he has the second Ice Block. So as you said right at the beginning, a lot of the time Rogue has to try and kill the mage 3 times, and that is extremely difficult to do. He does have the minion base to do it, but does he have the time?
It's a good question, and 1 Ice Lance was burned from that turn by Ikealyou, where he chose to go with the Fan of Knives after the Shiv to draw the extra card. So The burn potential is lowered a little bit, as now, finally, we see that Doomsayer that Viper would have liked to have had several turns ago, but now that is just a whiff. He just wants to draw burn from his deck every single turn. He can only stall for so much longer here. He has another Blizzard to protect his first Ice Block for another turn if he wants to. But he might just decide that the winning play is just to go here and try and pick up damage out of his deck. Doesn't play Pyroblast in the list, so there's not too much of a consideration of mana efficiency.
Yeah.
Because it's not like, you know, you're going to draw a 10 mana burn spell and you need to have all your mana available to fire it. So I think he can afford one more stalling turn here, which I think is what we're going to see him go for.
I think because he can play the Loot Hoarder and ping
ping
as
face,
well,
yeah.
that seems very efficient. And the odds on like your opponent sapping the Loot Hoarder again, well, that naturally makes their turn a little bit worse.
He's actually going to ping his own Loot Hoarder to play around the sap here, and he picks up the Ice Lance. So he now has 19 damage in his hand. The 2 6-damage burn spells, Frostbolt, Ice Lance. So he is up to 19 here. 19 plus 2 pings is 21, and he has 2 pings worth of turns here because he has 2 ice blocks.
Yeah, and like we said, that's pretty much if the mage can get hold of those ice blocks and, you know, steady themselves onto the board, that's a very good way to win this matchup. And why Rogue suffers, as we mentioned.
Yeah, but Ikealyou is going for a push here with the Leroy Coldblood of this play, and with the Deadly Poison, he is going to pop. I 100% agree with this line because he can't give his opponent a free turn off the ice block. The unfortunate side effect is that he is just dead to the whelps on board. So the winning line in most worlds just unfortunately ends up losing the game here for Ikealyou, if I've counted this correctly, which it looks like I haven't, unless Viper's miscounting.
Oh, hang on, he just stopped after the ice block. I was like, let me just do the damage
I'm pretty sure that's 21. 6, 12, 15, 19, 21 by my count.
Yep, that's without counting a ping, because you can't, right?
Right.
Yeah. Oh. Okay, guys, we need a recount just to make sure.
Fireball is 6. Roaring Torch is 6. That's 12. Frostbolt is 15.
19.
Ice Lance is 19, plus the minion attack. 3 mana, 6 mana, 7 mana, 8 mana. Pretty confident.
Yeah, so am I now.
Right.
I'm going to join you in this.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a kind of a rough one from Viper, actually just missing his chance at closing the game out this turn. But he has it in the bag anyway.
Yep, does have the game locked up overall, so it's not going to cost him. I do definitely agree with the line that Ikealyou took here. He was running out of time as well, just in terms of cards left in his deck. So, you know, he definitely had to make the push for several reasons. But yeah, Viper going to find himself over the line.
I think he fell into the trap of, I have a guaranteed win this game.
Yeah.
And I'm going to play that, play that out regardless of anything else.
Right.
So, you know, the 2 whelps isn't something that comes up too often, but Viper does get a point on the board versus Ikealyou. So, Noe actually, again, I was speaking to him yesterday, and he's actually talking about how much he's practiced, you know, with his team and with his practice partners in terms of just full preparation for this. So really, really going all out in this tournament.
Yeah, and the polar opposite to Viper, right? Who, you know, self-confessed is a lone wolf. He doesn't really have a practice group that he practices with. You know, he plays a ton and he practices and he's grinded out his preparation for this tournament as much as anyone, but he's doing it alone. And, you know, I begged the question before, is that what's responsible for some of these tech choices and weird archetypes that he's brought here? Does he not have that friend just to pat him on the shoulder and say, dude, this probably isn't the correct build of Rogue?
That's your job for me, Sol.
Yeah, it is. You're right.
It's definitely how our relationship works. But we did just see him put a point on the board versus Ikealyou with the Freeze Mage.
Yeah.
Bit of a rough matchup overall for Ikealyou. But, you know, it would have been cool to see the whelps here.
I know! I feel like it's been robbed away from me. I wanted those whelps pushing in for the 20 and 21st point of damage, but looks like we are ready to get back into it. And there you go. That is a 3-mana 4/3 that makes your hero immune. Violet Illusionist in Rogue. And now I spoke to Viper about this card. It was pretty much the first question I asked him. I sat down and said, hey, good to meet you. My name's Sottle. So what's up with Violet Illusionist?
Cut to the chase.
So, you know, the way he described it, he says, you know, he's not running questing, which most people are these days. And he wants to play Rogue in a more tempo-oriented fashion. And the only way that Questing Adventurer, again in his words, is strong as a tempo tool early in the game is if you have the hand where you have like backstab and a prep and another spell. His argument is if you play any minion plus backstab plus prep plus another spell, you are winning. so it doesn't matter too much what that minion is in that situation. So he likes Violet Illusionist for the utility of being able to trade into Dragon Warrior minions, you know, Deadly Poison and SI7 agent down a 5/4 or something without taking too much of brutality. And healing is something that has been cut from Rogue consistently over the last few tournaments that we've seen. So having that kind of, quote, healing effect in your deck, I can understand the validity of it, but I'm super excited specifically that we're queuing into a mirror match here, because we do get to very directly, you know, compare the tech card choice up against the questing adventurers that Ikealyou is playing.
Yeah, and what worries me in general about the Illusionist is I completely understand Viper's logic, you know, as you quite rightly explained there, but in like a control meta, like there's not that much stuff you're going to want to trade into anyway and actually kill. And like if you're expecting full aggro lineups, or at least half aggro lineups, then yeah, you know, I can get on board with that as an idea, but I feel like questing overall is just too strong.
Yeah, but no matter what 3-mana card or 3-mana minion you're choosing to put into your deck, Coin Tomb Pillager wins a lot of games. So that is a very nice draw for Viper here, being able to develop the first minion on board here, get the initiative, and Ikealyou doesn't really have too much of a nice answer. He's actually going to prep Sap here. This is actually strong recognition. Tomb Pillager, probably the best Sap target in the entire deck. Particularly apart from Edwin Van Cleef, which, you know, doesn't always have a huge impact on the game. In terms of just a vanilla minion, Tomb Pillager is such a great tool, and you're going to see Viper saying, do you know what? I agree with that line of play. I will do the same. Yeah,
that makes sense. And this kind of play as well was exactly what I saw from Ikealyou yesterday. He was very much just about denying the other rogue in the matchup and just say, you know, if you get too many minions on the board, you lose. Yep. If you get 2 minions to stick, then you probably just, you know, if your opponent gets 2 minions to stick, sorry, you probably just lose in this matchup overall. So kind of cool to see Viper just do the complete mirror play. Now Ikealyou does develop the Thalnos and just gets the re-dagger up for good measure there.
And second Auctioneer being picked up, the prep being used on the previous turn, definitely necessary just for tempo reasons, but does leave him a little bit short of being able to conceal his Gadgets and Auctioneer. And here we see the competitive debut of Violet Illusionist with the spectacular effect of healing Viper for 1.
Hey, just means he's still ahead on health.
Brilliant.
You know, he's just going to keep that health total.
Yep.
It's going to be really good there, just saving 1 damage. And also, to be fair, there's a 4/3 he's got to deal with, but you know what's really good at dealing 3 damage? The rogue weapon with Deadly Poison.
I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say I am yet to be convinced by Violet Illusion. I'm going to need a little bit more.
Hey, sometimes you just got to dagger into those Thalnos and then not take any damage.
It's true.
Okay, so Ikealyou does look like he's starting to get ahead on the board. He's behind on cards. Obviously, Viper does have that coin as well, and the conceal with the Gadgets, and so really good for Viper so far. But Ikealyou has the minion on board, and that minion's a Tomb Pillager.
A minion is a Tomb Pillager, and that's a huge threat. And, you know, very, very often, you know, this matchup used to be very, very combo focused back in the pure Miracle Rogue days, but as time's gone on, you know, Auctioneer and Leroy have got nerfed, and more powerful tempo minions like Tomb Pillager has been introduced to the deck. So quite often this mirror match now gets decided less often by who gets the huge combo turns and draws their deck, and more often by who can get ahead on tempo and then just jam Cold Blood on something and conceal it, right? And just, you know, attack face twice with a Tomb Pillager hitting for 9 or something. So Ikealyou being the first person to really stick a minion here means that he has a chance in this game, even though Viper looks to be in a far superior position with the Concealed Auctioneer.
Yeah, and Ikealyou has the opportunity this turn to just completely ignore everything. Not that he can really interact with the Gadgets and his stealth anyway, but Gadgets and into Cold Blood on the Tomb Pillager and just smack him in the face is definitely a good option to go with and really get aggressive. But doesn't like Ikealyou disagrees, and he's eyeing up his Tomb Pillager zone. Means he's got potential of actually just having 2 coins available to him, and obviously the SI draw makes him be able to really just work that turn in a lot smoother. Yeah,
I don't mind this. I think he really wants to pair that Cold Blood with a Conceal. He doesn't just want to expose the minion to only attacking once. I think he realizes that he is, you know, he's on the race plan. He has to be. He's down on cards. You know, he's going to be facing an incredibly destructive turn here after the Gadgets and Conceal. So I think he understands that his line here is just to bank a Cold Blood and conceal the minion and hope that he can push through the damage that way.
Yep. Viper has the opposite problem of now he's actually got a lot of options and continual card draw from the Gadgets and as well. So he has the at least more complicated turn to deal with, and his plan's going to be a lot more fluid depending on what he draws into.
it's not a great clear, is it? It's just not lining up too perfectly. Would have loved a backstab to go along with all this. So he'll lead out with the Eviscerate here, but for example, Fan of Knives just doesn't really have too big an impact on this board. So he's going to go ahead and use both Eviscerates instead, slap down the remaining 3-3 with his Deadly Poison most likely, be able to push 4 to face with the Auctioneer, but that is actually a fairly underwhelming cycle turn for a Concealed Auctioneer with all of your mana available.
Yeah, very minion heavy, and for the following turn, suddenly Auctioneer doesn't look too amazing, like, unless there's a good fan target. Because also with that many minions, you don't really want to just fan for the fun of it either.
Oh, baby. This game is going off. This is going to come down to just the next couple of draws from both of these players. Ikealyou is going to need to pick up some extra damage off these Gadgetzan cycles. Like I said, he has that Cold Blood available to him that he can now bank on a concealed minion. Edwin is huge, but he can't. He just misses out on being able to conceal the Edwin as well by 1 mana, which would have been just an insanely huge swing on the board, an immediate threat of lethal, and all the Violet Illusionists in the world would not have saved him from that much damage the following turn.
No, that would have been pretty incredible, actually. Now Ikealyou's just stopped going, like, okay, what is the game plan now as SI7 agent, again, because of the conceal, won't actually be protected in any way. Do you actually just go for the Cold Blood this turn? That's the scary problem here.
I mean, I think this is the line he's considering. He's trying to work out, you know, what is higher win rate between just a huge Edwin Van Cleef right now, SI7ing to take damage and cycle off the board, and just, you know, jamming the Cold Blood and trying to draw more cycle tools and push through my deck this turn. He decides that just limiting the card draw options for Viper is the best plan, and with the prep being picked up, that looks like a decision which might put him in a pretty strong position here, because with Leroy in hand for Viper, he would not have needed to cycle too much to pick up the extra damage he needs to push through.
Yeah, there's already 2 Eviscerates gone for Viper, but there is Cold Bloods knocking around, which it would have just been game if he'd drawn into it.
Yeah, so now awkward position for Viper, because if he wants to play the Auctioneer here to start cycling this preparation and fan again, that means that he's pretty much locked out from any possible lethal, more or less, having spent too much mana to then commit Leroy. So again, this game is just on a knife edge, and like I said, with that conceal being picked up on the previous turn, it was going to come down to the wire. Both of these players now have the opportunity to make the push with a conceal. But as I pointed out early on in the game, it's just Ikealyou has got to do it first, which leaves him in a pretty solid position.
Yeah, I mean, this is the idea now that Ikealyou is in or was in a good position, but he is behind on health, and now Viper's pretty much just setting himself up for lethal next turn, because just that slight health difference, that 1 point of damage.
Right, so now Ikealyou needs to go, and he needs to find that card there, Leroy Jenkins, which his deck just kindly presents to him on the first attempt. So this is now 14 damage, 3 mana available. He has 1 more cycle to pick up Eviscerate or Cold Blood number 2. This draw is huge. That is a whiff, and that is going to most likely be the game going to Viper, who's going to now square up the series.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, especially with the conceal having to come out beforehand. Doesn't mean he can even just hope to leave the Leroy on the board and try and just kill him next turn. So it's going to be looking pretty rough with the Leroy there. It's easy lethal for Viper, and he evens the match up at 2-2 in the Rogue Mirror. How important was the 1 damage saved? That's what you've got to think about it.
Entirely irrelevant.
So you've got to think about it.
Yeah. Think about it.
Yeah, just think about it. TJ will be thinking about it right about now.
He will.
But yeah, Viper has evened it up 2-2. We are back with the 5th game. It is 2-2 between Ikealyou and Viper. And Viper talk about there, really into maths, which is a pretty reasonable thing to be good at if you're going to play Hearthstone.
It's definitely not going to be a handicap, and he was talking about statistics particularly, and risk assessment and probability, and that is a huge asset in Hearthstone. We've seen in a lot of these interviews, TJ asking the question to people of are you a risky player or are you a conservative player, and having a good understanding of probability and statistics puts you in a position where you can almost take that question out of the equation, and it's not a matter of risky or conservative anymore. It's just a matter of the highest win rate play on each possible turn. So,
as we do start the next game, Viper on the Druid. versus Ikealyou on the Rogue again. So we continue to see Ikealyou's Rogue try and get that win he needs to continue on to the series and potentially win it. But Viper playing the Druid as well, and I don't know what you think about this matchup because you've been playing a lot of Druid very recently, but I feel like the Rogue can actually just be too fast for the Druid to deal with a lot of the time.
I really don't like this matchup. I find it very, very unpleasant. I think one of the ways I've been most successful playing this matchup from the Druid side is just very spell-heavy early game hand into cheap Arcane Giants, because that's the one threat that they can't really interact with their deck. You know, if you play an Arcane Giant for 2 or 3 mana or less, and their answer to that is sap. Well,
okay.
Yeah, sure. Like, go nuts, buddy. That's great. You know, as long as they don't develop some huge tempo turn with a Van Cleef at the same time or a questing adventurer, then it's not really a big deal. But the mere fact they have the potential to do that is one of the big reasons why this matchup is so difficult, because they can swing the board so easily, and then Druid really struggles to fight their way back on.
Yeah, but Vipers have got off to a quick start here as he's managed to actually get out, and as your Drake did innovate it out, which means he missed 1 mana off the full, you know, straight up innovate there. Yeah. But I do like getting the minion ahead of the Rogue, because as we said, like, if Rogue gets a couple of minions down early, gets the Tomb Pillager down, then I feel like Druid falls into the trap of always being on the back foot, trying to deal with the Rogue minions, and then it just very swiftly gets out of control. And Ikealyou going with the Van Cleef over the SI7 agent to clear. That's an interesting choice.
It is, and I think what Ikealyou's plan is here is, if this thing lives, guess what's happening? Cold Blood jammed on there, go to the face, conceal. He can even just questing conceal and conceal both
that's
minions,
what I was thinking,
and then still have the Cold Blood available. So I definitely don't mind this push. This is, you know, one of those situations we talked in the previous matchups where sometimes your highest win rate line with this deck does look quite all in, but you know, sometimes it pays off very, very rapidly. And
I think a lot of the time it pays off, actually.
Yeah, this is a deck that is better equipped than most other decks in Hearthstone at cashing in on those all-in situations.
Yeah, since Quest Adventure became a staple, I would say, in Rogue, there are so many games I've watched cast that pretty much go Quest Adventure with Van Cleef Conceal, and then their opponent just sits, looks at the screen for a minute or two, and then realizes he cannot do anything about this and dies.
It's a Nightbane Templar from the Mulch. That is a Dragon Synergy card. 2/3 that summons 2/1/1s if you have a dragon in hand. Of course, Ikealyou does have some Azure Drakes in his deck, so he can potentially get some use out of that, but it's a card that's a little bit exposed to swipe even if you do come out with it. So against Druid, probably not the best pickup.
Yeah, really not too great. Not to the extent it could be. We've seen a Tyrion today from Mulch, so...
What if the Mulch gave him a Violet Illusionist? Oof. Think about it.
Viper would just accuse him of copying. It's like, don't use my tech card. It's only me. So we see the Azure Drake obviously challenging the Tomb Pillager, but the idea for Ikealyou is he just, you know, he needs to play a minion to start trying to beat this board back down, and he gains the coin even if it's cleared up. But Viper has a very easy answer in the form of the swipe. Does mean he can only follow up with a hero power this turn. Well, could Moonfire face, but probably not the great play there. But he does have Nourish if he just wants to actually just cycle through his deck.
Yeah, I think he's just doing various combinations of Arcane Giant maths here as to how each play influences what turn his Arcane Giant is going to come out. Decides that nothing really changes the clock in an enticing way and just goes ahead with the swipe plan as you suggested.
Yeah, we see Ikealyou now not actually having too many great options to deal with this Azure Drake outside of having to face tank it, which kind of feels terrible.
Here we go. It's time to make the push.
Yeah, this is it. He's got Cold Blood. He's not got much else. He does have the Conceal for the following turn, of course, if the question survives. And to be fair, Ikealyou's just seen a swipe.
Yep, Mulch used, swipe used, and there is no answer in hand here. Even Nourish cannot pick up, or it could pick up a Wrath, which he could then pair with the Moonfire in his hand if he wants to go for the all-in play of Nourish to cycle here. But
do you feel like you have to do that, though, because you just leave a question on the board?
You do have Yogg. It's not a big Yogg at all. It's a 4-spell Yogg right now, as you can see from the handy Arcane Giant counter, but it might be enough for, you know, it might be enough of an upside to pull you away from the absolutely miserable feeling play of just trying to draw exactly for a Wrath. So I mean, it's tough. It's really tough.
I think the issue as well is that, let's be honest, any other option doesn't really feel great for Viper here either.
Agreed.
If he nourishes into cards, great, he has 2 mana, and maybe he gets the Wrath, and then, you know, everything's looking a little bit better now. But you know, just Violet Teacher, Moonfire Hero Power doesn't feel great.
Yeah,
so
I think the more I look at it, the more I think you have to. I don't see a particularly
even without the
strong
Wrath, I think it's the right play.
He's going to ramp. Oh. He's going to ramp Violet Teacher and Moonfire here.
Wants to play that Yogg.
So he is just going to, he's on the Yogg plan here. He's just loading up the Yogg. But even now, after all those spells being committed, this is only a 6-spell Yogg. So it is a big ask, particularly because Yogg-Saron does not interact with concealed minions. It obeys targeting laws.
Yeah, that's kind of nuts, actually, because it means... But also it's a little bit scary because if he plays Conceal, all his minions will be stealthed, and Ikealyou's only on 14. So there's always something to consider where any burn spell that doesn't hit Viper's own minions are just going to automatically hit Ikealyou.
Yeah, so I think Ikealyou's job here is to get his questing adventure, at least the first one, out of the range of high damage AoE spells. So Flame Strike, if you can get it up to 5 health, you should feel relatively secure, and then you're asking for some insanity with, you know, Twisting Nether, Doom, or, you know, some buffed up Shadow Flame, for example, to try and take care of it. So I definitely like this line. And Ikealyou, I'm sure, smells that it is Yogg O'Clock from Viper right now. So I'm 100% confident the Conceal is coming.
Yeah, with what was followed up there from that Nourish ramp, then, you know, there's very limited options going straight into turn 10. Pretty much the play, and we'll see how fast Ikealyou actually does just play Yogg. He's going to put the attacks in first, which is something that is talked about quite often.
His hero power is live, so one of his spells, there you go, straight away, is wasted on an Innovate. Those are whiffs. 10 health on Ikealyou's Rogue right now, so Pyroblast is live. 2 of that damage done with Head Crack. Lay on Hands, even if it hits his own face, is probably not going to be enough. And I think we are very rapidly running out of spells here, Raven. There you go, that was the last one.
Too small.
Just too small, and that is 2 questing adventurers sat on the board right now getting buffed up, and just concedes the damage is in play, all ready to kill him. Ikealyou does pick up the win with the Rogue at the 3rd time of asking now, I believe.
Yeah, and again, we just see the power of questing adventurer overall, and why we were, you know, a little bit worried about Viper's deck choice in terms of not including it, because sometimes it just does that. So Ikealyou is 3-2 up, only needs to win one more game. Ikealyou singing the praises of his team and practice partners. Can't really argue with it so far in terms of just getting to top 8 is an achievement in itself.
Yeah, it definitely is, and again, it comes down to the difference in the preparation for these 2 players, right? Ikealyou very, very clearly saying there, you know, the outside perspective is really useful to me because, you know, there's something I might have missed. It's just a different set of eyes that looks at the game a different way. And, you know, Viper himself is just in a one-man practice group, you know, grinding out to himself, which, you know, is an incredible testament to him, honestly, that he's managed to get this far without the assistance of, you know, one of these high-level practice groups. But he is going to need to make that extra push, and we are back to one of the most controversial decks in the tournament, the Dragon Control Warrior, that is going to have to come down against this aggro Shaman from Ikealyou.
Yeah, and I was speaking to Ikealyou, and he was talking about the Shaman list he chose, like aggro over mid-range, and it's the one he took by far the most flack on. He a lot of some of the pro scene he talks to, you know, outside of his team, and maybe even some of the players here were saying, well, why didn't you just bring mid-range? Because, you know, there's quite a surgence of the power of the mid-range Shaman deck at the moment. And he just said, well, yeah, I just think aggro's just better overall as opposed to try and target any specific matchup.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, as time has gone on, people are starting to appreciate the mid-range Shaman list a lot more, and it's by far the more common variant on ladder right now, for example. But there is still a place for just hitting your opponent in the face really, really hard.
Over and over again.
Repeatedly until they explode.
Yeah, and the interesting card in this deck, or at least one of them, is the Earthshock inclusion.
Yes.
Because suddenly, you know, these big taunt dragons that we've been looking at in Viper's deck, and the chance to discover, you know, Chillmaws, for example, can just be negated right at the, you know, the back end of the game where Ikealyou just needs to finish up, and then he just presses Earthshock for 1 mana and carries on. And
again, another consideration in these tournament lineups that, you know, makes you think these players have considered that they are going to come up against some very well-known Freeze Mage players in this tournament, right? Like, Doomsayer is going to lock you out of the game, so packing an extra Earthshock in your deck is a very big deal, as well as dealing with potential huge taunts, as you said. The Chillmaws in this case, but perhaps more commonly Ancient of War would be what it's being targeted at. But will remain to be seen whether it's going to have a huge impact in this matchup, or whether it'll be, you know, kind of a whiff draw where he would have liked to draw a second Argent Horse Rider, which is basically what it's replaced directly in the deck by looking at it.
Yeah, we see now Viper's actually, starting on the game plan of trying to just control and slow this Shaman down, just using raw minion power, as he did just use an Execute to kill off one, and then just relying on these minions to get even more value. And he picked the Hungry Dragon up from the Nether Spite, which kind of feels like an awkward pickup.
It was a pretty awkward discover. The other two were 9-mana cards, which you just don't want to pick a 9-mana card in this matchup. So even though Hungry Dragon is a little bit awkward, it's probably just the play here, because even if, say, a 2-1 or a Dust Devil were to come out here, he still has the superior trade. He can just leave the 1-1 up on the board. So he actually engineered a nice situation for his Hungry Dragon here, but this is a pretty oppressive-looking Shaman hand here for Ikealyou. 7-7 into Doomhammer obviously cannot be played in consecutive turns, but having the threat of both of them over the course of the game is one of the big keys to beating up control decks. And then he has just a pile of damage behind that to back it up with the Rockbiter weapon and the 2 lightning bolts at a minimum, plus anything else that he draws.
Yeah, we know, we can see that it's almost like just a 2 to 3 turn plan to win the game already from Ikealyou, and it's completely on Viper to stop that happening. He doesn't really have too many good options at the moment. The shield block is available for cycle and some additional armor gain, but other than that, his hand's looking pretty lackluster to try and defend against this board, this onslaught Ikealyou's going to present him with. As Nether Spite not going to do too much. He's pretty much just all in on this 5-6, just getting work done.
He is, yeah. From Ikealyou's perspective, the 7-7 looks appealing from where we are because we can see no answer, but he's really taking his time here, because he's considering the implication of something as simple as Blackwing Corruptor, which then suddenly is a huge tempo swing right now, punishing the overload of the 7-7 and creating the trade on the board. But just looking through his hand, there just isn't really an ulterior plan to that, right? Apart from develop your huge minion, try and get it to connect face, and then try and back that up with the damage that you have.
Yeah, and the benefit is he has seen one Execute as well, so at least there's one of those really shutdown cards, as he executed a Feral Spirit earlier on. So at least that the hard punish is kind of, or at least one of them is gone from the deck so far. And now Viper's going to choose whether he actually wants to try and just commit to a brawl here.
It's not a terrible brawl, honestly. It's 66% to stop that 7-7 from hitting you in the face, which is more or less the only thing you care about right now. If the 1-1 wins, that's kind of a win for you, no big deal. And I definitely don't hate it. It's a very it's a gambler's decision in this situation. But again, we've talked about this several times during this series. Sometimes thinking about something as risky or conservative isn't quite the way to do it. It's just, is this my highest win rate line? And Viper looks like he's just going to take a slightly more conservative plan here. He definitely doesn't know that the opponent's hand is just packed full of damage right now, and exactly how punishing this 7-7 connecting with face can be. And he's also going to get punished by leaving up the 1-1 here, which now gets to connect for additional damage, or in fact take out the 5-6 here and leave his now 9-7 in complete dominant control of the board.
Yeah, the idea is if you didn't kill it last turn and you played a minion, you're not going to kill it this turn, more than likely.
Right.
And then this is kind of crazy. 9 damage straight into their face there, and we can see Doomhammer, Rockbiter, Lightning Bolt to follow up the next 2 turns.
Yep, only going to have 5 available to him on the next turn. So he overloaded for 1 with the Lightning Bolt on that turn, so we will probably just be seeing the Doomhammer turn come up. But then from his perspective, he's swinging in 2 more with the Doomhammer, putting his opponent down to 15, and then he has double Rockbiter and Lightning Bolt for lethal, which, if Viper doesn't gain more life than just his hero power gain during that time, he is just dead. But with the benefit of caster vision, there is 10 additional life gain in Viper's hand, which has something to say about that.
Yeah, I think the frustration is, though, with no shield slams, the shield blocks, yes, they extend life, but you can't really, bank on the armor to be able to help remove this 7-7. But hey-ho, you just play the brawl and win. But Viper's feeling much better about this game so far. But Snap Doomhammer, not too much of a surprise, especially because the thing from below is currently sat at 5 mana. Ikealyou hasn't bothered with those silly totems this game. It's just been face or nothing.
Yeah, and that decision to brawl that turn, it's a gamble, as we said, but I question the decision of whether it was correct on the previous turn, in which case he'd have 9 more life now, potentially with the same outcome, and even then the 1-1 surviving was a perfectly fine scenario. He goes ahead and uses both shield blocks immediately choosing to bypass the armor gain here, which perhaps signals his intention to just use that one turn to stabilize himself as hard as he can. And then on the following turn, this turn coming up now, he can start to make a more aggressive push and not have to worry about casting things like Shield Block.
Yeah, so now this is a tough question for Ikealyou. Normally, or a lot of the time, you want to get in the Rock Biter damage ASAP to stop a taunt coming up. But the only problem is maybe considering with this thing from below play is if you get the Rock Biter in now and then he can just secure his armor, play a taunt and then armor up behind it, then the Rock Biter damage just doesn't feel quite as impactful. And well, there's another way to gain a lot of armor.
Justicar True Heart is a very big deal here, but Viper doesn't know it, but first and foremost is putting up a taunt right now because there is a ton of melee damage in hand with those Rockbiter weapons from Ikealyou. So from our perspective, we know that taunting up here is first and foremost, but he is going to do no such thing. He is just going to address the board, and that is a miserable trade for him on the board. That, I believe, is just going to be the end of the series. That's 16 damage from the Rockbiters, 19 from the Lightning Bolt, and 21 from that one copy of Argent Horse Rider. It could have been an Earthshock, but he got the one he needed for that final 2 damage. And Viper, the Dragon Warrior, the unconventional Dragon Warrior, has come back to bite him in the end.
Yeah, actually ended up going 0-3 in this match so far, so unfortunate for Viper there, but congratulations to Ikealyou. You played extremely well there, had a cool matchup with the Rogue Mirror, which was definitely awesome to watch, but I just feel like Ikealyou's lineup overall was just screamed more power.
Yeah, I think it's just a product of a better practice environment. I'm sure if Viper wants to push forward from here, he will pick himself up a practice group, perhaps with some people that he's met today, right? Yeah. He might be invited to push forward from here and get into a strong group where he can apply the Hearthstone hive mind, because trying to fight these battles on your own is very, very difficult sometimes.
Definitely, but congratulations again to Ikealyou moving on, and he's actually fireside with TJ for the winners interview.
That's right, guys. I'm joined by Ikealyou, who's the winner of that last match. You said in your interview you had a little bit of obstacles getting here. How does it feel to come in and win your first match here?
Well, obviously amazing. One down, 2 to go. And let's just focus on the semi-final with George. It will definitely be a really hard match. He's probably one of the favorites coming into the tournament, but everyone has equal chances. So it will probably be a good show.
Yeah, definitely. I think both of you guys are 2 of the favorites coming in, especially after those 2 matches. So good luck in that semifinal. I'll let you go watch the matches and prepare.